The psychology of the conditioned self, which is who we think we are, or who the system tells us we are, or who we are brought up to be, or whatever, is based upon one thing and one thing only. So the whole of the so-called mental health of the conditioned self, which is a funny kind of a term, because the conditioned self can't really have any health, mental health, any sort of health. But it can have a type of virtual mental health, and the more virtual mental health it has, the more integrity it has as an illusion, the worse it is for us, the worse our mental health. But if we are to talk in terms of the mental health of the conditioned self, the idea of ourselves, the idea of who we are, then we could say that the mental health of the conditioned self, how well we perceive ourselves to be doing, is predicated upon control. In other words, the better we are at controlling, the more of a winner we are, the better our mental health, which isn't really mental health. In other words, the more effectively the mechanism of denial can work, which is exactly what I want. So when I'm in denial, if the system of denial that I am utilizing or selling myself to works even better, that's better for me. So I'll call that mental health, even though the state of being in effective denial of the truth is the inverse of mental health. But from my inverted viewpoint, it is good. It is what I want. It makes me feel good. It translates into that particular type of feeling that we can call euphoria. It translates into a good feeling. So to be a good liar, I suppose we could say, just not to mince words too much, that feels really, really good. It produces this commodity, which is the ultimate commodity in our society, which is the commodity of euphoria, i.e. security or comfort or pleasure. Having a good regard of yourself is euphoria. So in other words, if you meet someone who's a complete and utter knob, and they think they're great, even though it's screamingly obvious that they're an awful jerk, a complete and utter asshole, what's making them feel that is this euphoria thing. So euphoria makes us feel good, but not for a good reason. Like if I do a shitload of cocaine, it'll make me feel good, but there's not necessarily a real reason for me feeling good, apart from the cocaine, obviously. And the same thing with drink. I sit at a bar and have a good few drinks, the world looks like a better place, doesn't it? But that isn't based on anything else. So euphoria is a kind of a deceptive type of feel-good factor. And it's the deceptive type of feel-good factor that the extrinsic self or conditioned self absolutely needs in order to function. So if we take away that feel-good factor, like if we turn it down till it's almost not there at all, the extrinsic self doesn't do well at all. Boy, oh boy, it just doesn't do well. It has a shit time. Because it can no longer coast on its delusions as happily as it could before. The delusions are wearing thin. So it stands to reason, since this society that we live in, most unquestionably, is all for the sake of the ego, the extrinsic self. It's not for our inner nature. If you take a look around you in our culture, is there anything there that speaks to our heart or to our soul, or just using those terms in a vague kind of a way? I'm not implying any metaphysical premise by talking about souls. But on that deep level, when we look around ourselves, do we see anything that resonates? Do we? Hell, of course we don't. What we see is something that resonates with the extrinsic self, which is kind of like a little kind of parasitic little organism that we carry around inside of ourselves, as William Burroughs has said. So here we have this fascinating way of looking at things. We can say that we have two ways of looking out at the world. One is the way of the parasitic possessing personality, and Jung uses this term of possession by the personality, possession by the ego, possession by the role or the mask, which is alien to us these days because we don't like the word possession because it sounds like demonology, and we've gone beyond that because we know there's no demons. We are the demons. Hell is empty and the devils are all here, as William Shakespeare has said. But we don't believe in demons. We don't need to. We are the demons. So we look out at the world. I kind of forgot what point I was making then. We look out at the world either from the point of view of the possessing entity, which Carlos Castaneda calls a foreign installation, or, even more to the point, the predator's mind. So the predator operates by giving us its mind. And we're kind of screwed because everything we do is on the basis of the mind that it has given us. The predator is not stupid. The predator is the ultimate predator. Of course, it's not stupid. It's the supreme predator, and we don't even know that it exists. And that's why it's the supreme predator. If everyone knows about a predator and you're watching for it behind every corner, make sure it doesn't get you, then that's not a very effective predator. But when you don't even know that predator exists and you refuse point blank to believe it, no matter what anyone says to you, then that's a good predator. You've got to take your hat off to a predator like that. Now, in point of fact, when we say, oh, the predator doesn't exist, which we wouldn't say because we wouldn't even entertain the idea enough to say that, to bother denying it. In a way, it's true because the predator has given us its mind, which means that we are the predator. So, of course, the predator doesn't exist because the predator isn't a predator to itself. The predator has already predated us. That's already happened. The perfect crime has already taken place. So, of course, we can go around saying there's no predator. There is no persona that possesses us and makes us believe that we are it. Of course, we don't believe anything like that because we're far too far gone. So when you talk to me and try and say that to me, you're not talking to me. You're talking to the possessing persona. You're talking to the ego, the extrinsic self. You are talking to the predator itself. And you aren't going to get very far like that. The predator's not going to entertain you. So we have that way of looking at the world through the extrinsic self. And then we look at the culture that we have created, and it contains all sorts of things for the benefit of the extrinsic self, of the self which isn't really us, the self which is a collection of programmed responses. So Daisaka Aikido says, in the West, we specialize in building palaces dedicated to rapture. And when he says rapture, he's talking about what I would call euphoria, the bliss of the ego concept, the self concept, the thing that allows us to be the extrinsic self, i.e. believable delusion, lies that we can bank on. So we build palaces, the most glorious palaces dedicated to rapture. The rapture, not a Christian rapture, he's talking in a different concept, but the rapture of who we aren't, the rapture of the extrinsic self. So that's kind of good. It's like being in Las Vegas or something. It's all exciting. It's all great. It's good. It's good. It's good. Look at this great. So the world is built for the benefit of this possessing viewpoint. And if we try to put that in, if we try to water that down and put it in a slightly, in such a way that isn't so strong, we'd be missing the point entirely. This is the point that you can't really mince words about. It's a strong point. Too strong for us to get. It's too big a thing for us to get, for the most part. We just like to have insipid truths told to us. Open up any textbook on psychology, you'll have these incredibly insipid truths. It doesn't really matter whether one way or the other what they say. It's not going to really move you that much either way. But this one concept, this one cycle, it will, if you get it, it will completely knock you sideways. It'll turn your world upside down. Gives a whole new perspective on things. Obviously, it gives a whole new perspective on things. But anyway, rather than getting into that, it doesn't really matter. For the point of understanding the idea, all we need to do is understand the idea that these two basic ways of looking at the world, one which comes from the extrinsic self, and the other which is kind of coming from a deeper place. So when we're a deeper place, that corresponds to the inner life, or who we are underneath all of the programming. So when we look at the world from this deeper place, the societal constructs, the games that we play, the world that we've built, doesn't seem so great at all. In fact, it seems like hell. It's awful. To say that it's in atrociously bad taste wouldn't be the half of it. And we can do that. We can flip from one to the other. Or that's the idea that I'm articulating here. So we can see society as it's supposed to be seen, which is by the extrinsic self, which means we don't really see it for what it is at all, but we're just hooked by it, manipulated by it, controlled by it. So the system works fine that way. Or we see it for what it is, which is a much more horrific prospect. It's like waking up from a stupid dream in which we think everything is okay when it isn't, and then we wake up and we see, shoot, this is one bad situation that I'm in. So that's what it's like. It's like waking up into a bad situation. Because we are in a bad situation, and what brought us there is unconsciousness, because we don't really want to relate to what's really going on, so we ignore it, and then what's going on gets worse and worse, which is a key psychological thing. Turn your back on it because it's too painful and too difficult and too awful, and it will ferment and get more and more toxic, more and more poisonous, more and more powerful. And yet that's what we do with all these dark corners of ourselves. So that's how we kind of create the predator, if you could put it like that. Or that's how we make conditions that are suitable for the predator to move in. So when we see things in an unconscious way, it's like being in a fairground or something. It's like, isn't this fun? Let's go and have fun. And it's easier to do that. But it's all on a false basis. It's not really what it seems to be, what it is really. It's a one-way. It's an irreversible journey to our doom. So this is what I was calling doom-seeking behavior in an earlier episode. We're seeking our own doom very eagerly. We don't know that we're doing it, but what seems good to the extrinsic self is actually poison for us. And we're following the dictates of the extrinsic self because we have denied any deeper level of awareness that we might have within us. So then we have this interesting situation, coming back to the idea of the health, in inverted commas, of the extrinsic self, the conditioned self, that the better the lie, or the better we are at buying into the lie, the stupider we are, the better it is for us from this viewpoint. And that makes sense. We just have to look at the way things are at the moment. You can see within all the mass cultures, the cultures where everyone's been turned into a kind of generic version of everyone else, there's this immense, what you could call stupidity. It sounds like pejorative, but it really means not able to think for yourself, a lack of autonomy. which makes the person look like a complete idiot. It would make us look very idiotic and very ridiculous to be like that. But stupidity isn't maybe the right word. But then again, maybe it is the right word. So we get this situation where we all see the reality that is the easiest reality to see. And as time goes on, any glimpse that we might have of another reality that isn't being programmed, that isn't part of the official broadcast, becomes harder and harder to see. And what's more, even if we do see it and we start telling everyone else about it, which is only natural, hey, guess what, guys? Guess what? I just had this kind of insight, this kind of epiphany. And what I realized is people aren't going to listen to you. Obviously, they're going to walk away on the whole. So you can't communicate it. And if you try and communicate it, you will be treated as if you're the idiot. It's an old story. It's kind of like the Cassandra complex. That's what always happens. If you talk sense in a world of nonsense talkers, don't expect anyone to appreciate it, really. So we're in this situation. I'm kind of wandering off topic a little bit all the time. We're in this situation where the one thing that matters is to have control. Because if I have control, that means that I don't see anything that I don't want to see. I only see the reality that I'm twisting reality, spinning reality to suit the way that to suit my continued unconsciousness, my continued existence in an unreal world. And so the better I can lie to myself, which is what control comes down to in a psychological sense. Because if I don't control, what happens, psychologically speaking? If I don't control the way I perceive the world, what happens? I just see the world as it is because I'm not controlling, I'm not interfering, I'm not manipulating, I'm not spinning, I'm not spin doctoring. All of these activities that the mind does constantly, ceaselessly, it never stops spin doctoring. From the moment we wake up to spin doctoring, what the hell? And we just call it thinking, but really it's validating our viewpoint. Every single thought we have is validating our underlying viewpoint. So the thinking mind is spin doctoring, and then we could say, well, what the hell happens when I stop? Now, apart from the fact it feels really freaky, it's like having the TV or the radio on the whole time and someone suddenly comes and turns it off. It's like, the silence is hard for us. But not only that, we start to see reality as it actually is, not as we've spin doctored it. So the spin doctoring is our superpower. Self-deception is our superpower. Making up our own realities is our superpower. And so the better we are at that, the more in control we are of that, the more that the so-called mental health of the extrinsic self, the self-construct, is up. So the health bar, if we're playing a game, and we are playing a game, we just see the health bar go up when we're able to see of ourselves well. So of course we get into collusions with other people, because a collusion is always better when it comes to lies. It's hard to be the only liar and have to keep lying to yourself. You can do it, but it's not as easy as finding a group of people who are all equally keen to deceive themselves and will do it in unison. And what have you got there? You've got a religion, you've got a cult, you've got every type of ism there is, as Jung says. People get together and they want to hit upon a lie that they can all believe in, so that lie gets reinforced. And then they'll treat people who don't take the lie seriously very badly, and they'll burn them or kill them or hang them or shoot them or whatever. That's what human beings have been doing for thousands upon thousands of years, punishing other people who won't believe the lie, the convenient lie. So curiously, then, the curious thing that I was coming up to is our concept of mental health, and how do we bring about mental health, or how do we cultivate it? So according to the Western world, we do it by getting better at controlling, are better at having skillful strategies and things that we do that will guarantee to have the result we want them to have. Evidence-based, they call it. It is said to be scientific. Look, we've scientifically shown if you deceive yourself in this way, you will feel better. Maybe there's truth in that. I'm sure it's possible to have a good way of deceiving yourself, that you're in control when you're not, that things are what you would like to believe they are when they're not. I'm sure it's possible to come up with some very clever strategies. And if you put a lot of energy into acting out those strategies and acting them, I have no doubt that you will feel better. Of course, you'll feel better. But is that a good thing?